Good evening from our headquarters in Kiev. This is Hromadske Sunday Show, the only primetime TV show explaining Eastern European geopolitical storm in English. My name is Maxim Aristavi. I'm a guest co-host tonight for the show.
And my name is Gulliver Cragg. I'm correspondent for France 24 and also a guest co-host for tonight's show.
Well, we have a bunch of very important topics to feature tonight. First and foremost, this recent Hromadske investigation into the murder of high-profile Ukrainian journalist Pavel Sheremet. It had covered really serious gaps in the official inquiry and also a possible link to the country's spy agency. We will also go to the east and we will talk about the traces of so-called Russian Spring in eastern Ukraine and Russian occupied territories there 3 years after it started. What kind of a mood is on the ground? Is there still fair play for Russia in government-controlled eastern Ukraine? Also, there are 3 years since the Odessa massacre, with lack of justice delivered in this very tragic chapter of Ukrainian history. And Eurovision, the impact of this popular European song contest on civil rights battles in Eastern Europe, and specifically in Ukraine. Was it this celebrating diversity for Ukraine or celebrating conformity? I encourage you to go on Hromadske's Twitter feed and to check out the live translation, broadcast and text broadcast of the whole show. You can also spot the best quotes there, also original Hromadske content. For the full versions of all the interview featured in the show, go to and.hromadske.ua, Hromadske's website. You can watch exclusive reports and dispatches by Hromadske team, including the recent investigation movie into killing of Pavel Sheremet. We will be right back in a second. Well, it has been a very important week here for Hromadske as the Hromadske team, together with the International Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, published a very important investigation into the murder of one of the most famous Eastern European journalists, Pavel Sheremet. He was assassinated 10 months ago in downtown Kiev. And Hromadske's investigation showed very concerning gaps into official inquiry into the murder, but also established a possible link to the country's security service and the people who might have been involved with the situation on the ground during the night before the bomb that killed Pavel was implanted. So before we started discussing this topic, I want to draw your attention to a clip from that investigation that we will show to you right now. Take a look.
At approximately 2:15 in the morning, two figures emerge on a boulevard not far from the apartment Pavel shared with his partner and civil wife. As the pair advances, it becomes clear that one is a woman and the other a man. The man, apparently feigning intoxication, crosses the street to possibly serve as a lookout. As the woman approaches a red Subaru, the car Pavel drives to work each morning. She bends down alongside the car for approximately 10 seconds, presumably placing a remote-controlled bomb under the driver's seat. The journalist's investigation began by re-examining the moment in the middle of the night when the alleged assassins planted the bomb. Here, questions about the police investigation begin. Reporters identified at least 6 witnesses present at the scene of the crime. At 2:41 a.m., just after the woman allegedly places the bomb, lights from a taxi come into frame. The taxi stops meters from the female suspect, who, after taking a few steps forward, appears to freeze. The male suspect then crosses in front of the taxi, directly into the driver's line of vision, before disappearing from the camera's view. Katya Dekonaidze, who supervised the investigation for the first 4 months, sat down with journalists to answer questions.
Из свидетелей, которые видели, как закладывали взрывчатку, кого вы вообще смогли найти? Потому что там, например, подъезжал таксист в 15 метрах.
Все таксисты были опрошены, все.
Мы просто общались с этим таксистом, и он сказал, что полиция его не допрашивала. Почему?
Я не знаю сейчас почему, но все таксисты, которые проходили, я это так знаю, все таксисты, которые проходили по делу, всех, конечно, опросили.
But apparently not the one meters away from the alleged assassins. Journalists found him by locating the passengers he dropped off across from Pavel's apartment and called him.
Тому що якраз в той момент, коли ви там стояли, якраз в той момент, буквально в 5 метрах від вас, двоє людей закладали вибухівку.
А, отак даже?
Отак даже, та ви людина, яка могла би згадати цікаві речі.
Какого цвета была машина у Шеремета?
Червона Субару, такий кросовер, такий червоно-вишневий.
Такой яркий вишневый, правильно?
Да.
Видел я такую машину.
Бачили ви таку машину?
Она недалеко от меня стояла, кстати.
І прямо видно, коли ви світите фарами, через дорогу Франка переходить людина перед вашими фарами. Це один з людей, які закладали вибухівку.
Серьезно, именно в это же время?
Прямо в той момент.
Journalists noted 2 cars that arrived at the scene, a Mercedes and, most important, a gray Skoda. For the duration of the night, the passengers of these cars displayed suspicious activity. The men the Azovs identified as performing surveillance did not soon leave. They stayed on for hours, leaving only after the alleged assassins had passed them and planted the bomb. Their activity that night raises significant questions about what they were doing there.
Okay, for the result, we take the pictures, the frames from video, and we cut it and we put it in stack, and the result for this process was this picture. We can clearly read AA 2551 M and O.
Back in Kiev, journalists used a source with access to a Ukrainian automobile database to identify the owner of the Skoda. It traced back to a woman named Natalia Leonidovna Zarецka.
Посмотрите, Зарецкая Наталья Леонидовна, Шкода Октава, его зарегистрированная машина.
Хорошо, моя машина. Я, естественно, думала, естественно, об этом. Не могу я никак это объяснить. Это нужно проверять ГАИ, значит.
Natalia called back 2 weeks later. This time, in an unrecorded phone exchange, her story changed. She did know the car. She said she had been asked to place the car in her name to serve as a sort of proxy for another man. She agreed to identify him. His name was Igor.
Объясните такой момент. Наталья говорит, что машину оформила, вот эту машину оформила на себя. А вы говорите, что у нее купили. Как вообще с этой Шкодой? Если можно, прояснить этот момент.
По доверенности же можно это делать?
По доверенности, да? Я просто уточняю, да.
Совпало. Я вам уверяю, что вот это ничего не хочется. Вот машина, там мы это самое ездим.
Вот человек с такой сумкой вот здесь, через плечо получается. Это вы?
Это я, по всей видимости. По всей видимости.
Ви пам'ятаєте, що ви там робили?
Давайте, чтобы не это самое. Да, это было, я же уже говорил. Это была такая работа, что это частные услуги оказать. То есть там несовершенные дети. То есть мы приезжаем, я приезжаю, позвонили, надо помочь. Я приезжаю здесь, оказываю какие-то частные услуги. Не более.
А ви ще з кимось були? Хто це з вами був? Друга людина.
Там 2 людей выходило. Нет, из машины выходило 2 людей из вашей Шкоды.
Скажите, если я скажу, будет это правдоподобно, если кого-то подвез?
Нет, не очень, конечно.
Знаєте чому?
Подвез и поехал.
А ви одразу в процесі зважуєте, що краще сказати.
Це сталося у березні. Я прийшла на роботу, і Олена мені передала цей конверт, на якому було написано від руки для Альони Притули. Коли ми почали вивчати ці документи, власне, стало зрозуміло, що хтось слідкує за роботою «Української правди». І слідкую достатньо уважно, оскільки вони були навіть і про ті теми, які ми так і не встигли зробити.
Мы получили от службы безопасности Украины ответ, что в результате проведенной у них проверки такого слежения не было, такой слежки не было и в национальной полиции.
Meanwhile, the reporter's confidential source had gotten back to them about Igor. Igor, full name Igor Andreyovich Ustimenko, was born in Kremenchuk, Ukraine. He possesses a passport from Crimea, the region unilaterally annexed by Russia. He studied at an anti-rocket command school and has a listed address in Odessa, Ukraine. Most important, the document said, as of 2014, he is an employee of the Ukrainian Security Service. The wording of the document means Igor is, or recently was, a member of this intelligence agency.
Ваш виклик переадресовується на автовідповідач.
Journalists tried to reach Igor to confront him about his connections to the security service. But for weeks, journalists were unable to reach Igor. Igor's presence at the scene of the crime does not confirm he was performing surveillance or was involved in the murder of Pavel Sheremet. What it does confirm is a current or former member of the Ukrainian Security Service was at the scene of the crime.
Well, a couple of days ago, Hromadske's Natalia Humenyuk and I sat down with Anna Babinets and Dmytro Gnap, who carried out that exceptional investigation, and asked them for a few more details and also about what's going to happen next.
There was a latest development. Right after the movie, we would ask the details. You had a chance to talk to some of the officials. So what was also the reactions? How did you communicate of the Ukrainian government?
Next day, Minister of Interior Affairs announced that he invited journalists for talking, for questioning, but it was only announced. He didn't do it. I mean, we didn't get any official documents, any official calls that help us, come to us. But after that, we were invited to people from national police, and we had one meeting. It was interesting. We talked around 1 hour or more, and now we are thinking and we are negotiating about our possibility cooperation.
And the key figure of the investigation was this Ustimenko, who worked for the Ukrainian Security Service, and it was confirmed by the press service of the Ukrainian Security Service. Besides what we know from the film, how much and also what we know about him?
We know from security service that he was fired on in April 2014. So now we have like 2 information and any documents about it. So I don't know what is between this information, what is true. And as we know, it's not big problem for security service to make some documents because it's absolutely untransparency structure.
Yet his behavior in the interview with you is extremely bizarre. I mean, he doesn't look like a professional agent who knows what he's doing or who's prepared for this meeting, and yet he knew that you were coming to meet him. How do you explain the way he reacts?
It could be some way of pretending that he is a not official serviceman of Secret Service, because a lot of guys from Secret Service they could to pretend someone very good create some imagination that he is a stupid guy, he knows nothing, and so on. But in the same time, try to dig to take information from you. What do you know about him? What do you know about the situation? So it could be just a way of pretending like he is a stupid guy.
And is it the case, even if was no longer working for the SBU at the time of the events, can we conclude from the fact that he knew what was going on, that the SBU must have definitely known what was going on, that other people in the SBU must have also known what was going on? Or can we not be sure of that?
We don't know, because as we know, in every country, people who worked for some security structure, when they fired, they
still work.
They remain in contact.
It's pretty often. It's that documents we got from our source about this guy, Igor Ustimenko. We know from it that he also has gun, Ford 17R. And as we know, it's this gun used in our security structures.
There was some also information about the cameras and the information which had been deleted by the SBU from the cameras which were on the place of the murder. What can you say about that? That's what you mentioned before, during the discussion.
Yeah, it was it was one building, and we came there for asking about video. And guy who worked there with this video, this cameras and the CCTV and TV set, he told us that you can try to view it. We tried it for a long time, but he told us that. That recently some guys from SBU came and tried to record this information, and they couldn't, and they took away this server, or it was hard disk, and in couple days they gave it back. It was absolutely empty. We invited some people, IT specialists who tried to recognize something, and they told us that it looked like it was absolutely deleted everything. And very interesting that, as we know, police also hasn't this video.
Where we are looking, what we are looking now at. As a journalist, what people can do at this stage, and what you're gonna do?
Well, we promised that we will continue this investigation because we have some data that hadn't been included into this investigation, into this film, because we need to check it more. First of all. Second, we want to finally, as every investigator, finally we want to know names of people who executed and who organized this resonant and absolutely awful crime, killing of journalists here in Ukraine. This is a big challenge for all our media community, and we will try to find these guys who did it.
Well, today was another important event for Ukraine, annual press conference of the Ukrainian president, and actually the topic of the investigation into Pavel Sheremet's murder was heavily featured. A lot of journalists showed up in T-shirts with the title "Who Killed Pavel?" Again, bringing more attention to that investigation in gaps inside the official investigation. And Gulliver, you were at the press conference, and I don't know if it was just one question regarding the investigation or a number.
No, there were several. But also, before anybody even asked any questions, because people were wearing those T-shirts, Petro Poroshenko, at the beginning of the press conference, wanted to say a few words about it. And he spoke in emotional tones about his friendship with Pavel Sheremet. He also later on mentioned the fact that he's recently been talking to his mother, and very much wants to cast himself as being on the side of those who want to get to the truth in this. But of course, journalists were challenging him, saying that he had last year promised to pay very close attention to how this inquiry was being carried out. And as the film that Anna and Dmytro and the Organized Crime Reporting Project made shows it really hasn't been done very well, this investigation, and people were asking him, shouldn't he take some more responsibility? One journalist asked him, shouldn't he feel ashamed? And Petro Poroshenko...
It's important to point out that President Poroshenko has control over law enforcement bodies that are in charge of investigating this murder.
Yeah, so he reacted, though, to the question about that by saying, what are you asking me to do, set up a parallel investigation? He's avoiding having to, you know, take responsibility for this and trying to cast himself as being among us, those who are disappointed with it. He reacted quite emotionally to some of the questions, quite angrily, in fact.
Well, the country's spy agency, the Security Service of Ukraine, is in the middle of this investigation with unclarified links between a former worker of SBU and the role of SBU in the murder of Pavel Sheremet. But there is another important story, is some civil rights campaigners in Ukraine, including opposition members of their parliament, like Serhiy Leshchenko, they complain about illegal surveillance, in their words, by SBU of them. And I saw that question was also asked.
That was the question that perhaps drew the most angry response from the president. He started out by saying, won't you agree that you've never been freer? Ukrainians have never been freer. Ukrainian journalists have never been freer in their history. I think that point is even possibly a little bit contentious. I don't think it's so clear-cut. And then the president was clearly expressing support for the SBU, saying Ukraine is in a very difficult situation. Of course, because of Russia's hybrid war against Ukraine, this is undeniable that the SBU has a very difficult task. But why that justifies surveillance of anti-corruption activists, I don't really see the link.
You know, that was the cringing moment for me personally, because when I saw that, and we showed you a tweet about his angry reaction, justifying not just a whitewashing the inability or some illegal activity of SBU by Russian invasion. This is something I wasn't very comfortable with. You go very quickly from that to calling your critics traitors.
Yeah. This is, again, though, the tendency that we see with Petro Poroshenko and other high-ranking Ukrainian politicians to lean towards trying to suggest that any incriminations against them, any accusations against them or other agencies could be the work of Russia's hybrid war. That, you know, the SBU has a right. I guess the implication is the SBU has a right to investigate or to follow anti-corruption campaigners and journalists because they might be spreading information that's coming from Russia in order to discredit Ukraine. If you allow yourself to get into that, yeah, but if the country allows itself to get into those kinds of levels of paranoia, then every politician can use that trick to get themselves off the hook, no?
Another important question that was raised about President Poroshenko business ties. He's still an active businessman. He, you know, he says that he's not.
He says he's not, but in what way is he not?
He has a big business empire behind him. And a French journalist, Stéphane Sion, he asked a question about Poroshenko's business ties, about his investment.
No, he didn't. It wasn't Stefan who asked the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I stand corrected.
It was somebody else who asked the question. Yeah.
But we showed just a tweet that Stefan profiled this question. What was the reaction of President Poroshenko? I know that he takes those questions about his business empire in a very annoyed fashion.
Well, he said that he's not a businessman, but the journalist who was asking the question repeated that. Actually, it was Dmytro Gnap who was asking the question, who did the film about, and he said twice that Petro Poroshenko has not placed his bank, International Investment Bank, into a blind trust, and therefore I don't know in what way Petro Poroshenko can claim to not be involved in the runnings of that bank. But I mean, the problem for me with this is that it's quite easy for somebody like Poroshenko to reply to a question in quite technical terms about the functionings of a bank and why its capital has increased very greatly, and to off the cuff immediately understand whether he's telling the truth about it or not. It's not clear.
Well, for a lot of Ukrainian foreign allies and friends, it has been already developed into this huge elephant in the room when they talk about Poroshenko and his business interests and his rising wealth, and then some are joking about you allow another oligarch to run the country, but at the same time it's a bit tragic in the way that the massive conflict inside the country with captured state by oligarch interests. And then there is very solid questions could be asked. where that line goes and crosses between them being an oligarch and having his business interest and having sympathy to other oligarchs probably, and him being a person who's in charge of destroying the same system that he's a byproduct of.
It's not a question that's asked nearly often enough, in my view. But today, I think he got away with not really seeming to appear too ruffled and replying with some kind of fudgy language that didn't allow you to really understand what's going on.
Well, at least some things are right about liberties, that in Ukraine it's still possible to question president in an open fashion and manner. Well, we will end this segment. There is another important development for upcoming week. President Poroshenko travels to Europe, but in the Ukrainian parliament this Thursday, they're going to vote for another law that is pushed by presidential majority that's supposed to target anti-corruption national bureau. I know that you asked that important question as well.
So I asked about it, and Petro Poroshenko reacted by saying that it wasn't the government that was pushing this law. I don't know if that's technically true, but I think it's definitely members of the Petro Poroshenko bloc who are pushing it. Petro Poroshenko seemed to be suggesting that the law's chances of passing were not that great. This is a law that would say that the Anti-Corruption Bureau can't investigate any case that's already been investigated and that the investigation has been closed by another law enforcement agency, which obviously means if you're somebody who might be under suspicion, you just get a friendly prosecutor to quickly open and close a case against you, and then the Anti-Corruption Bureau can't lay their hands on you. What I guess was positive that my question, but also other people are putting pressure on Petro Poroshenko about this. I think I got the impression he's realized that they can't get away with this. And what he said in answer to my question was that if that law was really going to hamper the work of the Anti-Corruption Bureau, then he would veto it.
Well, that's not the first attack from the president's-led majority in the parliament on the Anti-Corruption Bureau. As Anti-Corruption Bureau keeps arresting people who are close to President Poroshenko or, involved with his business ties. Okay, that's all for the segment for now. We will be right back in a second. Well, 3 years ago, exactly on May 9th, 2014, Mariupol, the second biggest city in Donbas, became an epicenter of so-called Russian Spring in eastern Ukraine. A lot of deadly shootings and then riots happened in the city, with later paramilitary linked to the Ukrainian government entered the city and took control of it. Since then, the city has developed into the biggest frontline fortress for the Ukrainian government-controlled territories in Donbas. Hromadske visited the city 3 years ago to kind of pick up on the mood of locals and to answer the question whether Mariupol is still a fair play for fighting sides in the eastern Ukraine.
Присвячений пам'яті працівників органів внутрішніх справ та військовослужбовців, які загинули під час смертельного протистояння трирічної давнини.
Today, a lot of people feel regret and shame for those events and still don't understand how it could have happened. My son jumped from the third floor with his friend. There was no other way to get out of there. They could go neither to the left nor to the right. Everything was burning. Everything was well prepared. They killed them when they were already on the ground, 1.5 years before his seniority retirement, and he was shot.
The events which happened, there is a need to take measures to prevent them in future. Then we probably weren't prepared for such events.
What do you think about the police and the law enforcement agencies? Do they have everything right?
Can I use obscene language? They had weapons. It was in their authority to stop everything. They got cold feet. They took all the technical equipment, computers from there, and were hiding in the cellars with full bellies. All of them are still in office.
On May 9th, 3 years ago, almost simultaneously with the seizure of the building, the shootings between the National Guard of Ukraine and the separatists, who were then called pro-Russian activists, happened on the street which locals call Arbat. The video published by the Security Service of Ukraine after the investigation shows how people in civilian clothing hiding behind locals opened fire on the National Guard. In May, 3 years ago, Mariupol City Council had been seized and liberated 3 times. Separatists, who were holding a rally with the Russian flag, broke the doors to enter the building and organized their headquarters there. People have become more positive and pro-Ukrainian. The number of separatists is shrinking. It has gotten better. At least it's not scary now. Nobody will do anything to you for your patriotic position compared to 2014.
So, Oliver, this is a very important piece of journalism coming from Eastern Ukraine, because we don't hear a lot of stories from Mariupol, despite the size of the city, the importance of the city for the whole Eastern Ukrainian front line. There are so many reports about divisive mood inside the city. Despite that, the city went through a very traumatic period. And you have a very good background of traveling around Eastern Ukraine, traveling to other frontline cities, important like Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. Why do you think there is still, this divisive mood among the locals who cannot?
Well, in those cities like Mariupol, Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, which are in the Donbas, but in the part of the Donbas which is controlled by Ukraine, we shouldn't kid ourselves about it. A lot of people in those cities have pro-Russian attitudes, or more often what I encounter is anti-Kiev government attitudes. And in all of them also, I think there's probably more of it than it's very easy to be aware of, because people think that it's not a good idea to say that kind of thing, especially to Ukrainian journalists who are visiting, and a little bit less so to foreign Western journalists who are visiting. But the thing of somebody asking where you're from before they answer your question, and they'll answer it differently depending what your answer is very, very common there.
But Eastern Ukraine, Mariupol, Donetsk, or Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, they've been hotbed of Ukrainian corruption as well before the Russian invasion. And now, obviously, it's silly to think that corruption is suddenly fixed, ongoing warfare. But if you look in some polls, for example, International Republican Institute, that they did polling in those cities, the trust towards Ukrainian government institutions is so low, the lowest in the whole country, despite the influx of money, development money there, development projects, and so on and so on. So I sometimes wonder whether corruption is still so pervasive that it hurts Ukrainian ambitions to restore control.
I don't know, I've never met somebody in Mariupol, Slavyansk, or Kramatorsk who said to me, well, it's really great how much the Ukrainian government is investing here. We really see the difference. Maybe the money's going in, but they don't feel it, or they don't want to feel it. Also, I think that still a lot of people there are watching Russian media. They don't have a lot of confidence in Ukrainian news television, even if they are watching it. And so that obviously influences their views and perceptions. In my view, really, I think Ukraine could be doing a lot more to try to win over the hearts and minds of people in those cities. And especially one aspect that I just think is not working is the feeling that if you are against the Ukrainian government, or if you do have pro-Russian attitudes, then you could be in danger, then you could be reported to the SBU, then you could be deemed a separatist. It's very hard, obviously. It's very hard in a situation when there really are people acting as agents for Russia or for the separatist republics in those areas, and there are good reasons to suspect some people. But the climate in which people feel that the state could be their enemy, that the state views them as a possible object of suspicion, it obviously doesn't make people feel friendly towards their country.
Absolutely. Well, we'll be right back after this.
Well, a long way from the unrest that was taking place in eastern Ukraine in spring 2014, there was also a tragic, violent day in Odessa, in the south of the country, on the 2nd of May. 48 people died after clashes between pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian activists there that eventually led to a big fire in the trades union building. Odessa is still, I think, a city divided. Hromadske wanted to find out more about what the atmosphere is there today. So we've got this report for you from the commemorations that took place earlier this month there about that tragedy.
The main clash took place on May 2nd at Hromadske Street, on the Cathedral Square, where Euromaidan supporters faced off against ultras football fans and supporters of anti-Maidan. Between them stood a police cordon. 6 people were killed and hundreds more were wounded. Later that day, the opposing sides clashed at Kulikovo Pole, as Euromaidan activists attempted to clean up a camp of pro-Russian activists. Those remaining hid in the house of the trade union and defended themselves from there. The building was eventually engulfed in flames, as the parties threw Molotov cocktails at one another. 42 people died from fire, carbon monoxide, and injuries sustained from falling.
That was more than 3 years ago, but those guilty in the tragedy have not been punished. Some participants in these events have fled to Russia or the occupied Donbas, but most remain in Ukraine. There are 6 criminal proceedings in the May 2 case.
In the case of May 2nd, investigations have been conducted into the following episodes: mass clashes on Hromadske Street and Cathedral Square, setting fire to the House of Trade Union at Kulikovo Pole, anti-Maidan attacks at the March of Ultras football fans and Euromaidan activists, the inaction of rescuers and beginning of the fire at the House of Trade Unions, and the inaction of Odessa police. Key figures: 20 members of anti-Maidan were accused of organizing mass riots in the city center. Euromaidan supporter Sergei Hodyak is accused of killing one and injuring another anti-Maidan guard. Former head of Odessa's public security police, Dmytro Gnap, is accused of organizing mass unrest and official negligence. Former head of the regional police, Petro Lutsuk, is accused of professional negligence and the planned fraud wave. Former head of the regional department of Odessa Ministry of Emergencies, Volodymyr Bodolana, is accused of inaction in the first moments of the fire at the House of the Trade Unions.
These things are not investigated quickly, and such cases take months to be heard in court. We have to understand that investigations and trials take many years, maybe even 10 years.
Now the situation in Odessa remains tense. The city has quite active support for pro-Russian forces, but conflict between them and nationalist organizations is not as intense and arises mainly on symbolic dates or anniversaries. The situation is much softer than it was 3 years ago, but the conflict has not stabilized. It continues. In any case, resistance and opposition can be divided in 2 types. The first is the work you have seen in the pictures of May 2nd and 9th. The second type is disguised. They work as sabotage groups. Here, the SBU is very active and we're doing everything in our power to help them. That's to say that those who are screaming and spitting at the police are wrong.
On May 2nd, the 3rd anniversary of the tragedy of Kulikovo Pole, several thousand people came to honor the memory of the dead. But some used the event as a platform for political speeches. The next incident took place on the Victory Day, May the 9th, when flowers were laid at the side of the Eternal Flame. For the events, participants gathered for the March of the Eternal Regiment, but were prohibited from wearing St. George's ribbons and other Soviet symbols. Regular clashes occurred between them and right sector groups, which were broken up by the police.
Objectively speaking, the majority of people in Odessa don't care who is in power, let's be honest. Odessa has had every regime, every power in its history, and they are well accustomed to them all. As long as there is a Ukrainian state with its security forces in power, its army, and thousands of people who have gone through the war in the east, in the Ukrainian armed forces, Odessa will remain Ukrainian. It will celebrate Ukrainian holidays. It might muddy the waters on May 9th with the march of the internal regime, but that's all.
Well, today, Emmanuel Macron was inaugurated as the 8th president of the French Fifth Republic. His election last week was met with relief, I think, in Ukraine, because the other three leading candidates were all politicians who had expressed, one way or another, a pretty clear pro-Russian position. Emmanuel Macron is quite the reverse. To talk about a bit more what we might expect in this part of the world from a Macron presidency, we're joined now by Boris Naiman from the University Paris East. So yes, what's likely to change in terms of French policy towards Ukraine, Russia and Eastern Europe in generally?
First of all, the team of Macron is very aware of the situation and in Ukraine and Russia. That's the first very good point. The second thing is that, as you mentioned, all the time and today on the news, if you've seen, there is many European flags. So they're very pro-European. There is a project that is positive. It's not to be anti, but is in pro-European, reinforcing the capacity of Europe. And that is a subject that's very important for defense. The military issue will be discussed quickly, I think. The latest, and it's very important, I think, also for Ukraine, I think the team is interested by a kind of integration of the region and the special relation with European Union. They want to have a kind of agreement that was discussed with Mediterranean country, but with Ukraine and the country that want to have this agreement. So they're going to propose something very, let's say, constructive in a way for developing cooperation with this region.
What about the so-called Normandy format under which the Minsk agreements for the Donbas are being discussed by France, Ukraine, Germany and Russia? Petro Poroshenko in his press conference today said he expected that format would continue, but does France have any new ideas? Does Emmanuel Macron have any new ideas of how to maybe make some more progress?
I think before September, the election in Germany will be difficult to change the format and to change also proposal in this kind of format. That's sure that first of all, we need to have the election on the parliament in France in less than 1 month, and then the elections in Germany, of course, in September. So for the moment, this format, even if it's not functioning very well, should be kept because there is no other solution proposed on the table before September.
Will new president of France will change the power dynamic in the region? Because obviously Russian current leadership and President Putin responds very well to really charismatic European politicians like Angela Merkel. And will having Macron on her team increase the power of the European Union in negotiating through the crises in first and foremost in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine, with Crimea, but other important political issues across the region?
Yes, I believe so. But in a way, the question was the same with the war in the Balkans. And here is, how do you construct European Union? I mean, the crisis is not only a crisis on the border, as let's say, Ukraine is, to my point of view, defending a kind of European construction, but also from the European to find a way to construct differently the European Union at the moment. And that's the main issue at the moment. And I think, yes, Macron has, it is the first president, French president, with some new ideas and about what should be the European Union in the future. So in this way, this is changing totally what we can expect. Maybe we expect too much in French about Macron, we'll see. And we should look at really what he will do. We cannot expect something to be done before the election on the parliament, which is mid-June. So after the election, for sure there will be proposal on the table.
Boris, so a lot of English language coverage of French elections and then the Russian involvement with French elections.
Yeah.
try to paint kind of one-dimensional picture between Russia dominating European politics or not, Russia intervening into European politics or not. Now we see that obviously maybe the factor was important, but it didn't deliver the victory of pro-Russian candidate. Do you think that it changed the whole discourse about Russian role? Do you think that it was even overhyped the way it was portrayed as Russia can decide European elections in one way or another?
No, I think the team, it was very well explained in the New York Times paper, the team of Macron anticipate the attack. And so they put on purpose computers with either not important information, but they let this mechanism of stealing the mails and the mailbox be done just on purpose. They deliver information that have no interest. So they're aware of how they proceed. But you have to be aware that the attack during the campaign against Macron on Komsomolskaya Pravda were very tough. I mean, I think on his wife, they said he's an homosexual and so on. So the attack was quite tough during the campaign. So we shouldn't underestimate. But just the French people, they don't care about private life. It's private life. So you have your private life, and they consider that this is not a topic that should be discussed during election, and you shouldn't attack somebody unless this private life has something to do with politics directly, like a business, a private business, something, but not if it's a private life and you live your private life as you want.
Boris Neumann from the University of Paris-Est, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, France has been preoccupied not only with presidential elections. I want our producers to feature a cartoon from Charlie Hebdo from last edition about gay pogroms in Chechnya, where they actually ridicule anti-gay policies of Chechen leader Kadyrov in a traditional, very harsh way for the...
Charlie Hebdo's typically controversial style, but this is causing a real storm in Russia. Russian media are apparently talking about it a great deal, and it could have implications for Russian relations with France?
Possibly, but we wanted to keep focus on this story, and Hromadske has been featuring this story for many times on gay pogroms in Chechnya. And another news from last week, a number of activists were detained when they tried to deliver 2 million signatures of appeal to Russian general prosecutor to start investigating gay pogroms in Chechnya. We have a couple of photos of those activists who tried to deliver those signatures but were arrested by police, saying that basically it's illegal protest, just delivering those signatures. It all says a lot about that identity issues in the region are part of the conflict, part of the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine as well. Ukraine has just finished with Eurovision, which is, great song contest, some say, but also important event for LGBT community all around Europe. In Ukraine, officials try to disposition themselves from Russia, saying, adopting this very creative and progressive motto, celebrating diversity. But they even tried to paint this arc, which I think is a bit of even trolling. The arc was Soviet installed, a symbol of friendship between Russia and Ukraine, and authorities tried to paint it in rainbow colors, but unfortunately, far-right protesters prevented from finishing.
It seems to me the question here is the glass half empty or is the glass half full? A lot of people I've spoken to, when I said what a tragedy that they weren't able to finish it, replied by saying, but what a success that they were able to paint more than half the arch in rainbow colors in a country that has as many problems with homophobia as Ukraine, and where Pride marches there's only been one in the center of Kiev, and it was under massive police protection. I mean, some people are seeing...
Another Pride is coming. And before we go into our guest, I want to show this video, a viral video that our guest actually made of this arc of diversity. He actually, I think it got some kind of 6,000 views on YouTube, on Facebook. And he, Zoryan Kiz is a well-known Ukrainian LGBT activist, and he mocked the arc as some kind of a gay propaganda. Obviously, it was irony and sarcasm, but he just like shows how you can protect yourself from turning into gay. And I want to turn to Zoran, who's in studio with us. Thank you so much for joining us. I totally understand, and as a queer person as well, the whole irony behind this arc. On one point, this is something unimaginable to see such a statement in Ukrainian capital just like 3 years ago. At the same point, it's not finished. Authorities are so scared to even say the word LGBT. So some activists say that this whole campaign behind Eurovision and diversity was a bit shallow. Would you agree with that?
Well, thank you for having me, and I think that the arch of diversity, unfinished and already starting to peel off, and and it's just the front side. It's a perfect metaphor of how changes and reforms are going on in Ukraine. It's usually something to cover up the actual thing, the actual situation in Ukraine, and the whole slogan of Eurovision, Celebrate Diversity, is also very illustrative to me, because celebrate or celebration is a short period of time when people are happy, they perform some kind of rituals they might not understand, and then after the celebration you come back to the real life, which is not that happy, which is grey, which still has the issues that you were trying to forget while celebrating.
Well, it was a bit mixed message. If you look into the campaign, Celebrate Diversity, mainly, it was my impression, but a lot of people shared it as well, that celebrating diversity of male, white, body-abled, and cisgender people. Yeah, and absolutely. It's fine probably to be gay as long as you don't showcast it, which probably was the biggest cringing moment of the whole campaign. Yeah. Isn't it right? But would you agree that the whole Eurovision helped in any way civil rights battle inside Ukraine by even showcasing the problem, by allowing us to go on air and talk about it, by allowing you to reach out to your allies abroad?
Yeah, well, absolutely. It helped us start the discussion in the society, which we probably wouldn't have been able to start without the slogan and the Eurovision. The Arch of Diversity as an art project actually started 2 weeks before the Eurovisions, and the discussion was great. Many people were involved, and at the end of the day, at the end of the discussion, the far-right people, they really looked stupid. They looked silly, because most of the people actually supported the idea of diversity and equality, and they just were laughing at at the far right, who were so scared of a rainbow. They were so scared of probably turning gay, and we even had a joke that if the arch is at some point finished, there is a magic explosion and everyone in Kyiv becomes gay.
A magic portal towards progress.
Absolutely.
Just like go through it and everything is fine on the other side. Right. I know that you're also an active participator and you're part of the board for Kyiv Pride. And I saw that you launched, guys, a crowdfunding campaign tied to Eurovision. Was it, success for you to reach out to foreign allies, to Eurovision guests, try to kind of involved into very local matter of civil rights battle in Ukraine?
Well, that was what is striking me and what is upsetting me, because our fundraising campaign wasn't as successful as we expected it to be. There were really thousands of gay people in the city, and no one would deny it, but for some reason there was not so much connection between the celebration again, between the happy Eurovision gay crowd and local issues. Our target was to raise $10,000, which I think is not a huge money for thousands of people traveling to Kyiv.
And they're not necessarily poor people.
Absolutely, and even if each of them donated a cost of one drink to the campaign, we would raise much more than the target was. We were only able to raise less than $3,000. within 11 days, which is still not bad.
Maybe, is it an online campaign?
Yes.
So is it still ongoing?
Yes, absolutely. It's ongoing. The Pride March is this year's Pride March is taking place on June 18. So we still have some time. Not much, but we still have.
I know that there is some activists shared concern that because a Pride event is so close, but there was lack of communication between you and the authorities. By the time of this year, last year, by this time, it was already statements from the police that there's going to be protected statements from the some important members of the government or parliament. Why there are no talks at the moment about the security situation?
Well, we've been trying to schedule a meeting with the police for multiple times since January this year. So it's been almost, it's been a good 5 months since we are talking to the police and trying to schedule the meeting. I hope the only reason why we haven't met yet was the Eurovision, with enormous preparations and enormous numbers of the police in Kyiv. The number of the police was some 10,000 policemen, and then coordination with the National Guard and so on. It's a huge operation. So I hope that was the only reason why we haven't met yet. We are hoping to meet the police early next week, so basically tomorrow. And we do want to discuss some organizational matters with the police, such as the length of the march, because according to most of the participants from the last year, the march was too short. It ended basically almost right after it started, and we are not aiming big. Last year's march was 750 meters. We hope to double the distance this year, and also to more than double the number of participants. It was 2,000 participants last year. We hope for 5,000 participants this year. And
that's very optimistic.
Absolutely, yes. Well, I can only remain optimistic, with the situation in Ukraine.
Well, we'll keep following on the topic, obviously. Good luck with the Pride, but also I think that we want to now close the show with some reports from last night, Eurovision, which is a great event for Ukraine that tries to restore its image.
It was certainly a very jolly event. I was there in the fan zone, and I had a better time than I was expecting.
Really? Well, I decided to sleep, but I heard that a lot of people got satisfied with the organizing. Unfortunately, not all messages were channeled, but at the same time, a lot of people had fun, and it's so important in harsh times for the region as they are. Well, we'll leave you with that report. My name was Maxim Aristavi, was a co-host, and was happy to be here.
And I've been Gulliver Cragg. Thank you very much for joining us.
Keep updated through Hromadske Twitter and website and hromadske.ua, and have a nice week.
Yana, the first and obvious question, you've made the headlines by the surprise proposal from your now fiancé, Alexander, which was made on live television. Millions of viewers saw that. How did you feel?
Oh my God. First thing that came to my mind was, thank God I'm not standing. Thank God I'm seated so I don't fall. And then the host came to us. He was like, how do you feel after the performance? You announced such big news, like the baby. Is the father here? Yes, he's sitting next to me. And then all of a sudden he was on his knees. And I think my eyes shut down, and I couldn't hear. He was saying something, but I only assumed that he was saying, will you marry me?
What are your impressions from the competition overall?
It was by far the best experience I've ever had in my life. I learned so much. I personally grew a lot, which is the biggest thing that can happen to a person long term. I met so many wonderful people, some of the artists, some just parts of some delegations. We got really close with Malta. We hung out a lot with Montenegro. So those are all contacts that are in my network now and that can help me further on in my career.
When you go back to Macedonia, and when you meet your friends, your colleagues, they'll be asking you, so how was Ukraine? What will you say to them?
Definitely suggest them to go and see for themselves. They're gonna enjoy it. I will tell them to leave all the stereotypes on the side, like throw them away, and experience Ukraine the way it is supposed to be experienced.